California Men's Colony, known simply as CMC, sits on rolling hills near the coastal city of San Luis Obispo. From the outside, it appears quiet and distant from the chaos usually associated with maximum security prisons. But behind its layered fences, armed towers, and controlled movement zones exists a complex world shaped by power, survival, loyalty, and fear. This is not just a prison. It is a society within walls, governed by codes that few outsiders ever truly understand. Opened in 1954, California Men's Colony was originally designed as a medium security facility. Over the decades, it expanded into multiple yards with different security levels, housing thousands of inmates with widely varying sentences, backgrounds, and criminal histories. Some inmates are serving short sentences and preparing for release. Others are serving life terms and have not touched freedom in decades. This mixture creates a volatile balance that is carefully managed through strict classification systems and constant surveillance. Life inside CMC follows rigid structure. Days begin early with counts, movements, work assignments, and meal rotations. Every action is scheduled. Every movement is monitored. In this environment, control is everything. But official control is only part of the story. Beneath the visible authority of officers and policies operates another invisible system, inmate hierarchy and gang influence. California's prison gangs are among the most structured and powerful in the world. Their presence is not limited to high-security prisons alone. They operate across the entire state system, including at CMC. These organizations are built around racial groupings, regional alliances, and carefully enforced internal codes of behavior. For many inmates, alignment with a group is not always a choice, but a protective strategy shaped by the realities of prison life. The primary divisions inside prisons have historically followed racial lines, a system born from decades of institutional pressure, segregation, and repeated cycles of conflict. At CMC, as in most state prisons, these divisions shape daily behavior. Where inmates sit, who they speak to, how they work, and even how they move through shared spaces is influenced by these dynamics. Invisible boundaries exist everywhere, and crossing them can lead to serious consequences. While popular media often exaggerates constant violence, conflict inside institutions like CMC is real, calculated, and rarely random. Most serious incidents stem from disputes over finances, respect, territory, or violations of internal group rules. Contrary to public perception, chaos is bad for long-term control. Organized groups often avoid excessive disruption because it brings lockdowns, searches, and tighter restrictions that interfere with everything. The economy inside California Men's Colony runs parallel to the legal one outside. Commissary items become currency. Food, hygiene products, shoes, art supplies, and phone access carry trade value. Through these informal exchanges, power is built quietly. Debts are tracked. Favor is accumulated. Reputation becomes a form of currency. From the outside it may appear disorganized, but the system functions with remarkable precision. Despite its reputation, CMC is not only a place of punishment. It is also a place of programming. Educational courses, vocational training, addiction recovery groups, and mental health counseling operate alongside the harder realities of incarceration. For some men, these programs become lifelines. For others, they are simply a way to fill long hours. Rehabilitation and survival exist side by side, often in quiet tension. Correctional officers at CMC carry a unique and constant burden. They are not just guards. They serve as negotiators, crisis managers, investigators, and observers of subtle behavioral shifts. A small change in tone, seating patterns, or daily routines can signal growing conflict. Officers rely heavily on intelligence, informants, communication monitoring, and long-term pattern recognition. Preventing major violence is often a matter of anticipation rather than reaction. The most dangerous inmates at CMC are not always the loudest. Often, the most influential individuals operate quietly. They rarely seek attention. They rarely speak in public spaces. Their authority flows through others. These individuals understand how social systems work, both official and unofficial. They know when to apply pressure and when to disappear into the background. Isolation units exist for inmates who pose ongoing threats to safety or order. Life inside these units is stark. Inmates spend most of their day alone in small concrete cells with limited human contact. For some, isolation stabilizes behavior. For others, it deepens psychological strain. Prolonged isolation can distort perception, heighten anxiety, and erode emotional resilience. Mental health teams work constantly to balance security needs with human care. Gang influence inside CMC often mirrors broader patterns in California's prison system. External street leadership does not always control internal operations. Instead, internal hierarchies form based on sentence length, past conduct, adaptability, and credibility. An inmate who has spent decades inside carries experience that cannot be taught. Younger inmates often follow those who understand how to navigate both official punishment and unofficial consequences. Violence, while not constant, remains an ever-present possibility. A single incident can trigger facility-wide lockdowns that freeze all movement for days or even weeks. During lockdowns, inmates remain confined to their cells, programs stop, and stress levels spike. For administrators, lockdowns are costly and disruptive. For inmates, they are psychologically exhausting, breaking the fragile routines that help structure daily survival. Media portrayals often focus solely on brutality. But daily life inside CMC is far more layered. Men write letters. They watch television. They read novels. They study for certificates. They exercise. They talk quietly on yard benches. Prison is a place of tension, but also of long, quiet reflection. For some men, incarceration becomes the first place they examine their own choices deeply. Family connections remain one of the strongest emotional anchors for inmates. Visits, phone calls, and letters serve as lifelines to the outside world. For men serving long terms, maintaining these bonds often determines emotional survival. At the same time, the pain of separation affects families just as heavily as those behind the walls. The phrase, "world's deadliest inmates," is often driven by sensationalism. In reality, danger inside a prison like CMC is not defined only by violent acts. It is defined by constant awareness, unspoken rules, internal political negotiation, and the psychological weight of living where mistakes carry lasting consequences. Power is rarely displayed openly. It is managed through pressure, reputation, and influence. California Men's Colony has also evolved with changing policies. Staffing models shift. Rehabilitation strategies rise and fall depending on budgets and leadership. Technology now plays a larger role in surveillance, movement tracking, and contraband detection. Yet no amount of technology replaces human judgment. Prisons remain human ecosystems shaped by relationships, grudges, alliances, and fear. For inmates pursuing change, the path is narrow but real. Education allows men to earn diplomas and vocational certificates. Substance abuse programs attempt to break long cycles of addiction. Therapy challenges deeply ingrained thinking patterns. Success is never guaranteed, but transformation remains possible. For others, prison becomes permanent. Life sentences change how time is experienced. Days no longer lead toward release, but toward survival and aging inside concrete walls. For these men, legacy becomes internal. How they are remembered inside the system becomes more meaningful than any public image. Gang dominance has faced pressure from newer housing and classification reforms meant to reduce segregation and dismantle automatic racial control. These policies have brought both improvement and new complications, reshaping old power structures without completely eliminating them. Despite every security measure, contraband still finds its way inside CMC. Each discovery triggers investigations and searches. The persistence of contraband reflects a fundamental truth: no institution is completely sealed from human behavior. Mental health care remains one of the system's greatest challenges. Many inmates arrive with untreated conditions that worsen with incarceration. Depression, trauma, anxiety, and addiction are widespread. Treatment exists, but resources remain limited. For the surrounding community, CMC is both an employer and a symbol. It provides economic stability while standing as a reminder of the state's reliance on incarceration. Two separate worlds operate side by side, rarely intersecting beyond fence boundaries. At its core, California Men's Colony is a place where control is layered and constantly negotiated. The so-called gang secrets are not cinematic plots, but slow-moving power structures built through discipline, trust, and fear over long periods of confinement. The men inside CMC are not a single narrative. They are thousands of individual lives compressed into one institution. Some carry regret. Others carry anger. Some seek redemption. Others resist change. All exist under the same rules, yet live vastly different inner lives. Danger is often psychological as much as physical. It appears as constant vigilance, controlled speech, calculated movements, and emotional restraint. Survival requires awareness, patience, and adaptation. As night falls, the yards empty and cell doors close. The institution settles into controlled silence. Behind every door is a man facing his own thoughts, his past, and his uncertain future. The world often fixates on the extremes, but the deeper reality of California men's colony is quieter and more complex. It is about systems attempting to manage human behavior, and individuals learning how to exist within those limits. Inside CMC, power is not simply enforced. It is negotiated continuously between officers and inmates, between rival groups, between fear and hope. The prison stands not only as a place of confinement, but as a living study of human behavior under pressure. Beyond its fences, life moves freely. Cars pass. Waves strike the coast. Time flows normally. Inside, time moves differently, measured in counts, routines, and reflection. This is the hidden reality of California men's colony. Not just danger and control, but endurance, routine, struggle, and the constant tension between who men were, who they have become, and who they might still be. In the end, what defines California men's colony is not only its walls or its reputation, but the human decisions made inside it every day. Choices to escalate or restrain. To follow or to step away. To change or to remain the same. The prison absorbs these choices endlessly, recording them not in headlines but in routines, reports, and silent personal reckonings. When men eventually leave its gate, whether after years or never at all, they carry those choices with them. And long after the cell doors close, those decisions continue to shape the lives they return to, proving that the true reach of a prison extends far beyond its fences. California men's colony does not run only on written rules. Beyond the policies printed in manuals and enforced by officers, there exists another system, one built on reputation, trust, silence, pressure, and consequence. This system has no official handbook, yet every inmate learns it quickly. It is known simply as the code. And inside CMC, understanding this code often determines whether a man survives emotionally, socially, and sometimes physically. From the moment an inmate arrives, he is assessed by housing staff, by classification boards, and by other inmates. The official process assigns a yard, a security level, and a cell. The unofficial process assigns something far more permanent, a place within the social ecosystem. This ecosystem is shaped by alliances, backgrounds, and unspoken expectations that govern daily behavior. New arrivals quickly discover that prison life is not random. Simple actions, where you walk, where you sit, who you speak with, carry meaning. Seating in the chow hall is not casual. Gym equipment is shared according to invisible schedules. Yard benches belong to unofficial groups. Even laundry rooms operate under quiet agreements. These boundaries exist not for cruelty, but for order. Breaking them introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is dangerous. The prison code is rooted in predictability. When everyone understands the boundaries, conflict is minimized. Trouble usually comes when someone violates expectations, either intentionally or through ignorance. A man who disrespects another group's space, speaks out of turn, or ignores warnings may find himself suddenly isolated from protection. And inside prison, isolation is one of the most dangerous positions a person can occupy. Contrary to dramatized fiction, most violence inside CMC does not erupt spontaneously. It is often preceded by patterns, disrespect, debt, rumor, betrayal, or perceived weakness. Small issues are addressed quietly before they grow. When they are not, pressure builds. Conflict is then carried out not as chaos, but as enforcement of social order. One of the most misunderstood aspects of prison life is how frequently restraint is exercised. Violence disrupts everything. It brings lockdowns, heavy searches, loss of privileges, cancelled programs, and stricter surveillance. Organized groups understand this well. While conflict does occur, long-term stability is usually the priority. Control is more valuable than chaos. Inside CMC, communication rarely happens openly. Messages move through layers of trusted intermediaries. Direct confrontation is avoided unless absolutely necessary. This system of indirect communication allows disputes to be negotiated before they explode. It is a constant process of tension management occurring beneath the surface of daily routines. Correctional officers monitor these patterns closely. They track seating shifts, changes in association, body language on the yard, and sudden silence where there was once casual talk. These subtle changes often signal growing instability. Interventions are made quietly through housing adjustments, program separation, or increased supervision. The goal is always the same: disruption prevention. One of the greatest myths about prison gangs is that leadership is always the most violent individual. In reality, leadership is usually the most disciplined and strategic. Influence is built through reliability, conflict management, and long-term thinking. Loud personalities draw attention. Quiet ones accumulate power. The men who hold real authority rarely raise their voices. Their strength lies in consensus and consequence. Others act on their behalf. Their presence alone often prevents conflict. This type of leadership mirrors organizational control structures seen in corporations more than the chaos portrayed on television. For younger inmates or those serving their first long sentence, the psychological pressure is immense. Prison strips away familiar structures, family presence, personal autonomy, daily choices. In their place is a rigid system that demands adaptation. Some adapt quickly. Others resist and struggle. The first year of incarceration is often the most emotionally turbulent. Many inmates enter CMC with unresolved trauma, addiction, or untreated mental health conditions. Prison does not create these struggles, it concentrates them. The environment amplifies whatever a man brings with him. Anger becomes harder. Anxiety becomes sharper. Paranoia becomes louder. Without proper coping tools, these emotions spill outward. Mental health teams inside CMC work under constant pressure. Caseloads are heavy. Resources are limited. Progress is slow. Therapy must exist within security boundaries. Sessions occur under monitoring, within strict time limits. Privacy is never absolute. Yet for some men, these sessions become the only place where vulnerability is allowed. Rehabilitation inside prison is often misunderstood. It is not a transformation that happens suddenly. It is slow adjustment. It is learning how to pause before reacting. How to accept accountability. How to sit with regret without being destroyed by it. Some inmates embrace this process deeply. Others reject it entirely. Both responses carry consequences. Education is one of the few program areas that consistently shows measurable positive outcomes. Inmates who earn diplomas, vocational certifications, or college credits often develop new identities beyond their charges. Knowledge becomes a form of escape long before physical freedom arrives. It changes how time is perceived. It turns waiting into progress. Yet even education operates within the social structure. Classrooms are monitored spaces. Respect between different groups must be maintained. Disputes that spill into educational areas jeopardize those programs for everyone. As a result, education spaces often function as rare neutral zones within the institution. Work assignments also shape daily life. Kitchen crews, maintenance teams, clerical staff, landscaping crews, each position carries different social weight. Some offer movement privileges. Some offer better access to staff communication. Some are physically exhausting. All contribute to how identity forms inside the prison. For the men serving life sentences, daily routines take on a different emotional meaning. When release is uncertain or non-existent, time shifts from being something to escape to something to manage. Many lifers build strict personal schedules. Exercise becomes ritual. Reading becomes refuge. Spiritual practice becomes grounding. These routines are not luxuries. They are survival strategies. Religion plays a significant role at CMC. Chapel services, meditation groups, and spiritual counseling offer an emotional outlet that operates outside gang identity. Faith communities often bring together men from different backgrounds under shared belief. These spaces do not erase social boundaries, but they soften them. Family remains the strongest emotional tether to the outside world. Visits are deeply regulated, scheduled, monitored, limited. Yet those brief moments sustain identity. A man who is still a father, a son, brother, or a husband inside prison retains emotional grounding. For inmates who lose family contact, the sense of disconnection can be devastating. Phone calls become precious. Each minute is measured. Conversations are filtered through awareness of monitoring. Words are chosen carefully. Yet even constrained communication carries enormous emotional weight. A child's voice. A mother's reassurance. A partner's encouragement. These moments echo long after the call ends. For correctional staff, emotional balance is just as fragile. Officers work in an environment of constant readiness. Hyper-awareness becomes instinct. Trust is dangerous but necessary. Every interaction carries dual meaning, human and professional. Officers must manage authority while preserving rapport. It is a psychological balancing act that produces long-term stress. Burnout is a real risk. The emotional load does not end when a shift ends. Many carry the tensions home. Sleep disturbances, anxiety, and hypervigilance follow them into civilian life. Mental health resources for staff exist, but stigma often prevents their use. The relationship between officers and inmates is often portrayed as purely adversarial. In reality, it is more complex. Mutual predictability becomes a survival tool on both sides of the bars. Officers learn who they can speak openly with. Inmates learn which officers are consistent. Stability grows from repetition. When major incidents do occur, aftermaths ripple across the entire facility. Lockdowns restrict movement. Programs pause. Tensions rise. Investigations unfold slowly. During these periods, silence becomes heavy. Everyone waits, officers for answers, inmates for resolution. Time stalls. Contraband discovery triggers intense reactions. Technology searches, cell extractions, yard sweeps, and interviews follow. Each investigation sends a message, nothing is ever entirely hidden. And yet contraband continues to return. This constant cycle reflects the deeper truth of incarceration: control is never total. Healthcare inside CMC faces enormous demand. Aging inmate populations produce increasing medical complexity. Chronic illnesses, mobility issues, and long-term pharmaceutical treatments require constant coordination. Prison infirmaries function closer to hospitals than clinics. Yet care must always operate within security limits. Inmates age faster than the general population. Years of stress, addiction histories, limited past healthcare, and psychological strain accelerate physical decline. Some men enter their 50s feeling like they are already elderly. The reality of growing old behind walls adds another layer to the burden of long sentences. Among the most psychologically difficult struggles inside CMC is the passage of missed life milestones. Funerals that cannot be attended. Children growing into adults without daily presence. Marriages that dissolve under time and distance. These losses accumulate quietly, shaping the internal landscapes of men who learn to grieve in silence. Despite every hardship, moments of humanity persist. A shared laugh in the yard. A quiet conversation on a bench. A letter that arrives unexpectedly. A class completed. A skill learned. These moments do not erase the pain, but they interrupt it just long enough to make endurance possible. The code inside CMC is not simply about survival. It is about maintaining order within confinement. It dictates when to speak and when to stay silent. When to act and when to walk away. When to assert and when to surrender. Mastering this code is not about strength alone, it is about emotional intelligence under pressure. For those who fail to adapt, consequences arrive. Isolation, vulnerability, psychological deterioration, or institutional discipline follow. The prison does not reward chaos. It absorbs it, neutralizes it, and moves forward. To the outside world, California Men's Colony may appear as a single structure behind fences. Inside, it is thousands of separate emotional journeys unfolding at the same time, each shaped by identity, history, fear, regret, and endurance. As night descends again over the yards, doors close in ordered sequence. The controlled rhythm resumes. Inside each cell, man reflects alone on what he did, what he lost, what he hopes, and what tomorrow may bring. Within these walls, survival is not only physical. It is psychological. It is emotional. And it is shaped by choices made moment by moment under the weight of confinement and the unseen pull of the code that governs life inside California Men's Colony. Time behaves differently inside California Men's Colony. Outside the fences, days flow with purpose, work, family, movement, choices. Inside, time stretches, bends, and often feels suspended. For the men confined within CMC, the years are not measured by seasons or holidays, but by counts, meal rotations, lockdowns, program cycles, and the slow accumulation of memory. This altered relationship with time reshapes identity itself. For inmates serving short sentences, time represents endurance. Every day completed is one step closer to freedom. Their conversations orbit around release dates, parole hearings, future plans, and unfinished lives waiting beyond the walls. But for those serving decades, or life, time becomes something else entirely. It is no longer a path forward. It is a landscape they must learn to live inside. Long sentences change how men define meaning. When release is distant or impossible, motivation must come from internal sources rather than external reward. Some men build discipline through exercise, education, religion, or mentorship. Others fall into emotional numbness. Some become sharply focused on internal politics and control. The path each man chooses shapes how his sentence unfolds. Inside CMC, power is not held solely by those with physical dominance. True influence is built through longevity, reliability, and knowledge of institutional systems. Men who have survived decades behind the walls carry unspoken authority. Newer inmates watch them carefully. Their behavior sets examples, sometimes of restraint, sometimes of control, sometimes of resignation. There is an unspoken divide between those who still imagine a future on the outside and those who no longer do. The first group speaks of families, jobs, homes, and reunions. The second group speaks of routines, projects, and continuity inside the institution. These two worldviews coexist on the same yard, often side by side, yet separated by invisible psychological distance. For lifers, reputation becomes legacy. With no public future to perform for, the only audience that matters is the one inside the walls. How a man treats others, how he handles conflict, whether he honors his word, these qualities form the story told about him long after he leaves a yard or a unit. This internal legacy can carry more emotional weight than any external reputation ever did. Younger inmates entering CMC often collide with this reality for the first time. Many arrive with street-based definitions of strength and respect, built on speed, aggression, and defiance of authority. Inside prison, these traits do not always translate to survival. Patience, emotional control, and strategic thinking frequently matter more than raw force. Those who adapt often endure. Those who resist often struggle. Isolation is one of the harshest tools within the institution. While used for safety and discipline, long-term isolation changes how the brain processes reality. With limited sensory input, minimal human interaction, and constant confinement, perception begins to shift. Anxiety intensifies. Time distorts. Thoughts grow louder. For some men, isolation becomes a breaking point rather than a correction. Mental health units at CMC attempt to stabilize those most deeply affected by psychological strain. Treatment occurs under tighter supervision. Progress is slow and often uneven. Some men cycle in and out of crisis. Others stabilize and return to mainline yards. The prison environment itself makes long-term recovery extraordinarily difficult. Substance use history lingers inside prison even when drugs are physically absent. Addiction is not only chemical, it is behavioral and emotional. Impulsivity, compulsive thinking, and avoidance patterns remain long after physical withdrawal. Many inmates struggle with these patterns daily. Recovery programs provide tools, but the process is never linear. One of the most difficult adjustments for long-term inmates is grief. Death does not pause for incarceration. Parents age. Siblings pass. Friends disappear. Funerals occur without their presence. Goodbyes are delivered through letters, phone calls, or delayed notifications. Grief must be processed alone inside a locked cell, often without physical comfort or emotional privacy. This silent grief reshapes men in subtle ways. Some withdraw inward. Others become more guarded. A few become deeply reflective. The knowledge that loss will continue regardless of incarceration creates a unique emotional burden, one that compounds with every year served. Education programs continue to be one of the few areas where time regains forward motion. Completing a course produces measurable progress. Knowledge acquired cannot be locked away. For some men, learning becomes the first experience of success not rooted in survival or dominance. It offers a different form of power, intellectual autonomy. Vocational training brings practical structure. Carpentry, electrical work, welding, computer literacy, and other trades offer skills that translate beyond the institution. These programs also impose discipline, attendance, performance standards, and accountability. Even within confinement, competence becomes a form of dignity. Yet not every inmate chooses these paths. Some remain locked in older identities shaped by anger, ego, or loyalty to strict concepts of power. These men often become deeply embedded in the prison's internal politics. Status replaces growth. Conflict becomes familiar. Time becomes both opponent and companion. California Men's Colony operates at the intersection of these realities every day. Officers manage not just physical security, but emotional volatility, mental decline, and generational cycles of incarceration. Some officers spend decades supervising the same population, watching men age behind the same walls. They witness transformations both positive and tragic. The emotional toll on staff is rarely visible to the public. Compassion must be balanced with authority. Trust must remain conditional. Every interaction requires calculation. Over time, many officers experience emotional fatigue, not from singular traumatic events, but from the accumulation of constant vigilance. Correctional culture evolves internally just as inmate culture does. New officers bring different perspectives. Older officers carry institutional memory. Training programs emphasize de-escalation more now than in previous decades, reflecting shifts in correctional philosophy. Yet practical reality inside the yards always tests theory. When large-scale reforms occur, their effects ripple unevenly. Housing changes can disrupt established boundaries. Policy adjustments can destabilize long-standing routines. Technology introduces both efficiency and new stresses. Cameras expand surveillance but also magnify accountability. Every change produces both improvement and unintended consequence. Contraband continues to challenge institutional control despite technological advances. The presence of forbidden items reflects persistent human behavior, the desire for autonomy, comfort, and advantage. Each discovery reinforces the central paradox of incarceration. Absolute control is an illusion, even behind concrete and steel. Healthcare inside CMC now faces its greatest challenge, aging. Many inmates entered the system during periods of higher incarceration rates and harsher sentencing laws. Decades later, they remain inside with complex medical needs. The prison increasingly resembles a long-term care facility as much as a correctional one. Chronic illness, reduced mobility, cognitive decline, and terminal diagnoses now form a significant part of daily institutional life. Compassionate release discussions arise more frequently, placing administrators at the intersection of justice, public safety, and human dignity. These decisions are rarely simple and often deeply controversial. Family dynamics also transform across time. Children who once visited through glass grow into adults. Relationships fracture under long separation. Some inmates become grandparents without ever having held their own children. Others lose all remaining family ties and become socially invisible beyond the walls. For many men, faith becomes increasingly important with age. Spiritual identity offers continuity when all other identities erode. Chapel spaces grow quieter but deeper in meaning. Prayer, meditation, and reflection replace urgency. For some, faith becomes reconciliation with a life already lived. Mentorship becomes another path for older inmates. Guiding younger men offers purpose. Sharing mistakes offers meaning. Preventing someone else from repeating the same trajectory becomes a form of redemption. These mentor relationships are rarely visible to the public but deeply influential inside. Yet not all stories inside CMC are redemptive. Some men grow harder. Some deepen resentments. Some lose the emotional capacity to connect at all. Time does not heal equally. It amplifies whatever foundation already exists. Power inside the institution shifts generationally. As older leaders fade due to age, transfer, or death, new dynamics emerge. Younger inmates bring different values, communication styles, and responses to authority. This generational turnover continuously reshapes the internal balance of influence. Technology has altered prison communication profoundly. Digital visitation, electronic messaging, and monitored video calls have changed how inmates connect to the outside. While these tools increase access, they also remove physical presence, the handshake, the embrace, the shared table. Connection becomes more frequent but less tangible. Privacy diminishes further in the digital age. Every word recorded. Every movement tracked. The sense of being constantly observed intensifies psychological pressure. For some inmates, this pressure reinforces restraint. For others, it deepens paranoia. California Men's Colony exists within a broader national conversation about incarceration itself. Public attitudes toward punishment, rehabilitation, sentencing reform, and mental health continue to evolve. These debates shape life inside the walls indirectly but powerfully, influencing funding, staffing, programs, and policies. For inmates approaching release after long sentences, fear often quietly replaces excitement. The outside world has changed. Technology, social norms, industries, and even language evolve rapidly. Re-entering society after decades requires relearning how to move, communicate, work, and belong. Reentry preparation programs at CMC attempt to bridge this gap. Financial literacy, job readiness, emotional adjustment, and behavioral accountability become core focus areas. Yet no program can fully prepare a person for the shock of returning to freedom after years of restriction. Some men succeed. They rebuild families. They enter trades. They pursue education. They disappear quietly into civilian life. Others struggle under the weight of unhealed trauma, limited opportunity, and social stigma. Recidivism remains a constant shadow. For lifers who will never leave, reentry is philosophical rather than physical. They must re-enter themselves, to confront their past without the relief of future freedom. Their work becomes internal. Their legacy becomes personal conduct. Their redemption, if achieved, exists entirely within confinement. As seasons turn year after year, California Men's Colony continues its steady rhythm. Counts rise and fall. Yard gates open and close. New inmates enter. Others depart. The institution absorbs these changes without sentiment. The phrase, "world's deadliest inmates," appeals to sensational curiosity, but inside the walls the deeper reality is far more complex. Most men are not defined by constant violence. They are defined by endurance, boredom, memory, loss, reflection, and quiet psychological struggle. Danger exists, but it lives alongside monotony, routine, and long stretches of uneventful time. It appears in flashes, not perpetually. The true weight of incarceration lies not only in fear, but in repetition. Each night, cell lights dim. The sounds of the yard fade. In the quiet that follows, thousands of men sit alone with their thoughts. Some revisit old choices. Some imagine futures that may never arrive. Some rest in acceptance. Others fight against it. Time continues its work, reshaping bodies, softening edges, hardening beliefs, distorting memory. Prison does not freeze a person in the moment of their crime. It transforms them slowly through relentless duration. California Men's Colony stands as a place where power, time, and human psychology intersect daily. It is not a single story, but thousands unfolding simultaneously. Each man carries his own version of the sentence. Each day adds another layer to that story. And while walls confine bodies, they cannot fully contain thought, memory, regret, or hope. Those forces move freely inside every locked cell, shaping lives in silence long after the doors have closed.